You've got unfinished quilt tops, maybe 2 or 4 or 20 or more. Maybe they're sitting on a shelf or in a drawer, or like mine, they're hanging on hangers in a little armoire. Either way, you've got these unfinished quilts. You've invested time, you've invested creativity, you've invested money. What's the bottleneck? Why don't you have finished quilts? The bottleneck so often is the quilting. I'm Susan Smith and you're in my studio, Stitched by Susan. I'm working on sorting out some fabrics for a scrappy quilt, so I'll just keep sorting while we chat. But I've just been thinking so much about this and about reasons why sewers, makers of quilt tops, think perhaps they're not the person to finish their quilt tops. And you know, there are some reasons maybe why you think you're not the most suitable person, so let's address those one at a time. Often quilters will think, well, I don't know how. There's so many decisions, there's so many choices, there's so many new things to learn. I just don't even know where to start. And so you get discouraged before you even begin. Or maybe you think it takes a special person. Maybe you think it requires a long arm, right? To be able to finish those quilt tops, and you think, gosh, I don't have the money for that. So they keep sitting on shelf, in drawer, on hangers, not getting finished. Or maybe you think that it takes really fancy or really expensive equipment, and therefore you don't feel like you're in a position to finish those quilts. You think, I don't have space for it, I don't have money for it, that's just not the thing for me. I feel like, though, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice, because those unfinished quilts are a bit of a weight on you as a creative. I know, because I've been there. I sometimes still am there some days. But when I open the closet, the drawer, the cupboard, and I see those quilts, I think I should be finishing them. I should be giving them away. I should be completing the project that I've invested so much into already. And those shoulds, well, that's a bit of a weight on us. It really, really is. And so what can we do? How could you get those quilts finished? Here's the thing. I think that the ultimate goal for quilters is a finished quilt. We never start one, well, seldom, just for 'cause. Sometimes we do, just because the fabric's so pretty we can't resist. But mostly we start quilts because we intend to give them away. They're for family members, they're for charitable organizations, they're for people in need, whatever the case may be. Quilters are so generous, and we're often wanting to give those quilts away, and that's our reason for starting. And that's a fabulous reason. But then when we don't finish them, we're not getting to that end goal. We're not getting to that celebration point. So what's the hang up? The beauty of getting those quilts to the finish line and giving them away is when you can say you made the whole thing by yourself. Even though I am a long armer these days, you can see my long arm over my shoulder, and I quilt for other people, and I love doing that. Yet I do know quilters personally who their preference is to make the whole thing by themselves from start to finish. And I get that. So let me tell you for just a second about a little bit of my journey, because the point I want to make is that you don't need fancy or special equipment in order to be able to finish a quilt. It can be much simpler than that. So I first began hand quilting. That was how I grew up in my childhood and young adult years with my mom. And when I began machine quilting, I started at my domestic sewing machine. There was nothing fancy about it at all. It just did straight line quilting, and that was all I had, and that was great. But eventually, I knew that I loved it, and I decided to elevate and invest in a long arm, and this is actually a couple iterations down the road. But this is because it's my joy and my passion. But what I want you to understand is that extra equipment, that fancy, that big, right? That's not essential. That's my choice because this is my passion. What you do need to start is a willingness to learn a new project, for sure, to learn a new skill set. However, equipment-wise, the most basic sewing machine will do it for you. You can quilt so many projects simply with straight lines. Could even be a decorative stitch, but you're still stitching in a straight line at your domestic sewing machine. So the same machine that you use to sew together and piece that quilt, that can be used also to finish it and quilt it. So that is serviceable. It can even be beautiful. You can do things like parallel lines or cross-hatching lines or diagonal parallel lines, all kinds of things that you can do literally with stitching a straight line at your sewing machine. Next step up from there, if you want to go a little further, would be free motion quilting, which means that the stitching is more decorative. It doesn't just follow a straight line, but is able to move around and become swirls or bubbles or waves or whatever the case may be. And to do that, you need a machine which will allow you to drop the feed dogs. So those grippy bits that come up under the presser foot and pull the fabric through, you can drop those on most modern machines just with the push of a button. And when they drop, you are then able to move the fabric freely under the needle and stitch whatever you like on there. And that's called free motion quilting. And of course, taken to its extreme, that's what I'm doing at the long arm quilting machine too. My quilt is held flat and taut on there, and I drive with handlebars, and I drive a mechanized needle over top of that, the fabric layers, and that is also free motion quilting. So you can see there's all these steps, there's all these levels, and you can do whichever one appeals to you. So where do you start if you want to do free motion quilting? Well, I would start by first assessing the equipment that you do have. So a basic sewing machine will do, but you do need one that makes a good quality stitch, right? You're going to be stitching through several layers and some thickness of batting, so you need one that has a good quality stitch, but that can be a very, very, very basic sewing machine. I actually have a friend who quilts on her featherweight, so it can even be a tiny sewing machine. You just might be limited to smaller quilts. Anyways, assess what equipment you do have. Have some good thread snips, have some great quality thread. Think about your batting choices so you get a lovely feel in your quilts. But really, those are all the essentials, and they hold true no matter what machine you're stitching on or what types of quilts that you're making. From there, I would definitely begin with small projects, right? Things that are not too intensive, that are not a long time commitment, and that won't be too intimidating. So think, table runner or placemat or even mug rug, right? A little 6 or 7 inch mug rug. These are the types of things that you can get a feel for it. And there's a certain amount of things at your sewing machine that you learn by doing. And so by doing several small projects, you'll start to get the hang of what it feels like, especially as you get into free motion quilting. That's going to feel awkward to move the fabric under the needle. So it's going to take practice, but starting with small projects will give you wins right away, and you can measure those and take forward what you've learned into the next project and the next and the next, and you'll keep getting better. Having said that, take a minute to celebrate every one of those finishes, even if it is a little mug rug. Use it for your coffee at your desk. Give it to a friend who will appreciate the fact that it's handmade. But celebrate the wins. Celebrate the thing that you did get done. So if you're sitting here thinking, you don't know if you're the person to free motion quilt your projects or to just quilt them at a machine in general, let me assure you that you are. If you're looking for some tips, particularly in free motion quilting, for where to start and how to build your skills, grab my free PDF guide. It's called 3 Steps Toward Free Motion Quilting. So it just shows you how to begin with something that's really, really small and fairly easy, and then to add complexity and detail to make it better and more showy as you go without getting overwhelming in the journey. So grab that free PDF. And if you're thinking, I don't know if I'm the person to quilt my quilts, I don't know, consider this video your sign. If you have the patience to piece a quilt, to choose the fabric, the pattern, do the cutting, piece it, press it, then you have what it takes to machine quilt your quilt as well. Just get started.